Season 5 was a pretty monumental season for South Park, introducing beloved characters like Jimmy and Towelie, elevating Butters to a bigger role, experimentally killing Kenny for real, and generally just finding new ways to tell stories within the world of the show. But probably the biggest change came from perhaps the most infamous episode in the show's history, one that to this day is considered one of their best, Scott Tenorman Must Die. And that change has everything to do with how they write Eric Cartman. So today, let's fully dive into Scott Tenorman Must Die, look at how it subverted what we knew about Cartman at the time, and how it changed his characterization forever. Hey, this video is brought to you by two things today. One is my official compilation channel, Johnny Too Cozy, where I'm re-editing tons of my old videos into themed compilations, long videos that are great for sleeping or drawing. And second, my wonderful patrons who get tons of extra content exclusive to Patreon. We're currently in the middle of season 2 of our BoJack Horseman audio commentaries. Check those out if they interest you. Thank you so much for your support. I couldn't do it without viewers like you. Scott Tenorman Must Die aired on July 11th, 2001, the 4th episode of Season 5, and while this episode would ultimately alter the course of the series in major ways, I think what makes it work so well as an episode is that for most of the runtime, it isn't changing the status quo. The reason the entire episode works so well is because the turn at the end is so shocking, and that turn isn't shocking if it's expected. So for most of the episode, it feels like we're looking at classic Cartman, a character who is kind of an annoying little asshole, but isn't necessarily nefarious. And in classic Cartman fashion, the entire premise stems from him trying to act annoyingly superior to the other three boys, despite being fully ignorant of the things he's lording over them, which is getting his first pubes that he bought from a 9th grader, Scott Tenorman.
He let me have them for just $10. Cartman, you are so goddamn stupid, it's unbelievable.
In fact, the vast majority of the episode appears to just be a series of wholly embarrassing moments for Cartman, proof that he's actually as dumb as he seems. Every single attempt to get his money back from Scott is the most ill-conceived, foolish plan you could possibly imagine, and most end with Cartman being more embarrassed than before. His straightforward attempt sees him pretty directly bullied.
Hey, I said no! Now get your fat little butt out of here before I kick your head in!
After this, he glues the pubes to his face and pretends to be with the IRS, which actually ends with Cartman giving more of his money to Scott. After this, Scott desperately tries to buy the pubes back from Cartman, letting slip that he can sell them for $5 a pube at the pube fair, further humiliating Cartman as he travels all the way to Fort Collins just to be met with more pubes. Scott generally seems to always be 1 or 2 steps ahead of Cartman for the entire episode. Even Cartman's last-ditch direct attempt is completely ill-conceived and transparent.
Well, my grandma's in the hospital. She's very sick. Doctors say unless I can come up with $16 for operation, they're gonna put her down.
And would you believe it, Scott's feigned sympathy once again humiliates Cartman, goading him into doing a piggy dance and then burning the money in front of him. So this right here, I think this is one of 2 moments in the episode that truly break Cartman and alter his trajectory. This is the one that sets him on a genuine path for revenge. Before this, he just wanted his money back. After this, he wants Scott to suffer. And despite that fact, none of the other boys have any interest in his plan to train a pony to bite off Scott's wiener. But Cartman is dead set on getting revenge on Scott. But the second moment, the more important moment, comes later, after Jimbo and Ned teach Cartman that he needs to learn about his enemy and plan around his weaknesses. This initially just leads to another incredibly poorly conceived plan where Cartman tries to make it seem like Scott's favorite band Radiohead thinks he's super lame with lazy voice dubbing. But Scott's retaliation, showing the piggy dance to the entire group of kids, is arguably the catalyst moment for modern Cartman.
I'm gonna get Scott Tenorman once and for all!
The genius of the back half of this episode is, despite the clear change in Cartman's demeanor and the fact that they show him scheming and drawing up this new plan, it begins to play out exactly like the first part of the episode. It appears as though every single step of Cartman's plan is being thwarted or predicted by Scott. Cartman appears to be continuing his pony plan with the added detail that it will be at his ChiliCon carnival, something that Stan and Kyle decide to tell Scott, mostly because they've enjoyed seeing his continued humiliation. So Scott sends his parents to rescue the pony, cooks up chili filled with pubes for Cartman's carnival, and on the surface, it looks like another humiliation for Cartman is incoming. And this is what makes that turn so damn satisfying and shocking. The episode so thoroughly showcases Cartman's foolishness and stupidity that it was nearly impossible to believe that he was going to come out on top, but they seeded one line earlier in the episode.
Well, does Mr. Denkins know you're using his pony? He shoots trespassers on sight, you know.
Seemingly a throwaway line, but also the catalyst for Cartman's entire scheme. He let Scott think he was 2 steps ahead, when in reality, he was behind. And his retaliation for Scott humiliating him was so profoundly disproportionate that it truly came as an absolute shock to the viewers. Cartman goaded Scott into getting his parents killed by Farmer Jenkins, stole the bodies, chopped them up, cooked them into chili, and fed them to Scott. He tricks Scott into cannibalizing his own parents. And then, when he's crying over the loss of his entire family, his favorite band Radiohead calls him a crybaby.
You know, everyone has problems. It doesn't mean you have to be a little crybaby about it.
This was obviously shocking because of the severity of Cartman's crimes here, but also because it was so much further than Cartman had ever gone. While Cartman has definitely gone on to do comparably horrible things over the course of the series, this episode pulls a trick that you can only pull one time, because it has to come with an audience expectation of Cartman. After you open this can of cannibal worms, you can never pull that twist in quite the same way, because that expectation from the audience has now changed. The audience now knows what Cartman is capable of, and it also completely changed the trajectory of Cartman as a character.
It definitely did change Cartman. I mean, it took him from kind of a little shithead to like probably the most evil kid in the world.
And obviously, as the show continued, Cartman grew into a more overtly evil character and less of an annoying asshole foil to the rest of the group. It's where he pivots into the kind of character who would, say, fake a disability to compete in the Special Olympics, or lock one of his friends in a bomb shelter for weeks because he wants to go to a theme restaurant, or befriend a Lovecraftian god and use him to banish his friends to the sunken city, or dress up like Hitler and, well, okay, you get the point. Before this episode, Cartman kinda sucked, but this was the turning point, the moment that broke him and led him down a path of genuine evil. It is arguably the most important episode in South Park's history, though there are a couple other contenders, but this is the one that defined what Cartman would become, and Cartman is arguably the most iconic character in the show. And that big shocking twist obviously paid off in the fandom as well, though Matt and Trey claim that it was too much for some fans.
And some people really didn't like it because it was just too extreme for them, I think.
But despite this episode is routinely cited as one of the best in the show's history. You would be hard pressed to find a top 10 South Park episodes list that doesn't contain Scott Tenorman Must Die, and it's often in that number 1 spot. A few years back during the South Park Epic Episodes fan poll, it placed second, only losing to Make Love Not Warcraft. And I think the fact that Matt and Trey referenced these events so often is a pretty strong indicator that they see it as a majorly important turning point in not just how the show was written, but how the show was perceived. In season 9's The Death of Eric Cartman, we see Cartman bring an apology gift basket to Scott, mostly because he believes he's dead and can't pass on to the afterlife, but obviously this shows that this was an important moment in Cartman's history. He even referenced this episode's to Bart Simpson in Cartoon Wars.
That's like this one time when I didn't like a kid, so I ground his parents up into chili and fed it to him.
In 2012, they even made an entire platforming arcade game for the Xbox called South Park Tenorman's Revenge. Though the game doesn't have too many major story elements, Scott is the main antagonist and the final boss, complete with giant Tenorman mech suit. But the clearest indication that this was one of the most important defining moments in South Park history is illustrated in a 2-part episode that was literally written as a massive celebration of South Park's history itself, the now banned episodes 200 and 201. These episodes are fully self-indulgent in the most fun way, just this massive story that intertwines nearly every major and minor South Park story in history into one obscene celebratory 2-part episode. Tom Cruise in Scientology, Mecha Streisand, the Super Best Friends, the Gingers, Jessica Lopez aka Mitch Connor, and honestly this is all just scratching the surface. I'm gonna do a whole separate video about 200 and 201 another time, it's just so much to go over. But just as the twist in Scott Tenorman Must Die subverted audience expectations and changed the trajectory of the show, 200 and 201 subverts that twist itself. After revealing that Scott is the leader of the extremist Ginger group, it also reveals that Scott's mental breakdown eventually led him to discover a horribly ironic truth. Scott recreates the Chili Con Carnival to reveal this truth to Cartman. The town lied to Cartman back in season 1 when they revealed who his father was, and his real father is actually a member of the Denver Broncos.
Did I ever tell you that my father played for the Denver Broncos?
No.
That's right, despite being one of the biggest wins in Cartman's life, he eventually gets his comeuppance. He eventually learns that his victory over Scott Tenorman wasn't a victory at all.
You killed your own father, and then you fed him to your half-brother!
The twist at the end of Scott Tenorman Must Die is obviously the most infamous in South Park history. It's their most iconic twist and one of their most iconic episodes. And to celebrate the entire history of South Park in the 200 and 201st episode, Matt and Trey turned that twist into another twist. In an episode that celebrates the show, that is the centerpiece dramatic moment. Unfortunately, the other discourse about 200 and 201 overshadowed this fact, and it was further buried given that it's one of 5 episodes of South Park that is simply not available to stream because they are banned, I guess. Which is a serious shame, not just because it didn't deserve to be banned, but because it largely keeps this major twist hidden from casual viewers of South Park. It would be fun to see the show bring back Scott, but it's hard to imagine them doing that since these vital episodes aren't even available in the most accessible way. But that is a discussion for a different video. Regardless, it is clear that Scott Tenorman Must Die made a major impact on the show as a whole, not just because it's an impeccably written episode that subverted what we knew about Cartman in a shocking way, but because that subversion dictated the trajectory of the character for the rest of the show's history. It is an iconic, beloved episode that also had arguably the biggest impact on the show out of any other episode in history.
That's all, folks.
Stay mellow watching Johnny Two Cellos. He talks cartoons, he's a really cool fellow. He keeps you posted on adult cartoons. If that's what you're into, then grab a spoon and a very big bowl of your favorite cereal. Feels like Saturday morning cartoon material. Johnny Two Cellos, watch him on YouTube. Now enjoy this groove and bust a move.